Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit.
Hey, all you citizens of the world. We're back with more live from the Heartland. This is the second segment today, and we are continuing our attention to the Olympics. We've done that for the last few weeks. And our first interview today was with the track coach, Jim Knadel, and we talked about the Olympics. And now we're going to talk about an Olympics that didn't come to be here in Chicago. I got a little announcement in the mail not too long ago that said, and I quote, "I am thrilled to announce that Routledge Press will be publishing my account of the Battle for the Bid, the No Games Chicago story." And that's going to come out on August 20th, just a few days away. The book has a wordy title, No Games Chicago, How a Small Group of Citizens Derailed the City's 2016 Olympic Bid. And then it goes on to say it's an exciting read. So we are really happy to have the author, Tom Tresser, who we've known for his activist work, particularly around TIFs, which he'll talk a little bit about. But I'm excited to know about this book and how the Olympics were upended from coming to Chicago at a time when I still was in the restaurant business. So hello to you, Tom, and thanks for letting me run my mouth for that.
Hey, Michael, thanks for bringing me on the show. I love you guys.
Well, tell us about your book.
Well, so back in the day, you have to cast your mind back to 2007, 2008. Mayor Daley decided for some set of crooked reasons that he was going to bring the 2016 Olympics to Chicago. He'd never been much of an Olympian as far as I know, but if you have to remember what was happening in Chicago, there was scandal after scandal after scandal. There was the hired truck scandal. There was his people going to prison right and left. It was literally one thing after another. The FBI came to City Hall multiple times, and I think he changed his mind as a diversion. And to push the entire Chicago civic attention on the games as a diversion from the firestorm of controversy that was engulfing him at every turn. His popularity was low, and so all of a sudden, that's my theory, it was all hands on deck. He put his best people from his cabinet. His chief of staff, Lori Healy, went over to become the chief operating officer. And they started visiting all the foundations and business leaders. And within a little bit of time, they had $90 million to prosecute the bid. So all that was happening. And a few people got together and wondered, is that actually a good idea? So right away, you have a question of whose job is it to ask and interrogate a major project like that, which would be the biggest thing to happen to the city since the 1871 fire. Right. And the answer is apparently it was no one's job because everyone was piss afraid of Mayor Daley. They didn't want to say boo to him, even though people privately told me they thought that seeking the games and hosting the games was a horrible idea. So basically, a few guys got together and they formed a group called No Games Chicago. It was Bob Quellos and Ramson Cannon, two really thoughtful organizers. I joined them in late 2008. As I was doing my own research. And I kept looking around for someone who was taking the lead to say this is a terrible idea. Who, where? Activist organizations, the unions, aldermen, nothing. So that was the origin of No Games Chicago. It was a small group of people. Some of them had good civic experience, and some of them had never done anything like this. No office, no budget, and no friends. But we set out to upend the games, and we did. It's a story that includes civic thuggery, attempted bribes, and even a real-life spy.
Well, let's start off before we get into the bribes and the spies and all that. Why do you think this group of activists, why were they opposed to the games coming?
Well, just a little bit of research, anyone with access to the internet and any kind of curiosity could find the research and the reports on the games of the past. So again, we're talking about, this is research we're doing in 2008-ish, 9-ish. The Beijing Games were just in the past, And they were horrible. I mean, it was a human rights abuse show. Villages were destroyed. People were killed for protesting the games. Going back a little further, Brisbane, you had the games in Australia and the games in Athens that bankrupted this, that almost upended the economy of Europe from the debt that the government of Greece entertained. Going further back, the Montreal Winter Games of 1976 had just paid off their debt 30 years later. And all these things were easily found. You can talk to activists. We talked to a woman who was the head of a coalition for fighting for homeless rights in Atlanta. So now we're talking about 1996. And she said it was horrible. The police swept Black kids off the street. They printed 3,000 arrest warrants with young Black juvenile, pre-printed. And that's just one story that you can get with very little effort, and we spent some time, doing that research, and it was a horror story. I mean, basically, it's a city killer, with the debt, environmental destruction, civil rights abuse, and the growth of the surveillance state. So, if you're talking about Chicago's got too many police now, imagine, mercenaries and cameras on every street pole. I mean, it would take the situation today and ramp it up 1,000%. And this is what the recent games were telling us when we were looking back in 2008. So yeah, it was scary.
Let me throw in here that I know that the games have bankrupted some countries, and it's a lot of dough. And what about was the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles a little different? Was that privately funded? Because that one gets billed as real success.
Yeah, that's an anomaly because they used some of the stadium that was already there. It was low key, and it was the first games that used corporate sponsorships aggressively, as we understand today. Where brands are everywhere, and today it's a multi-billion-dollar operation. But those games were credited with sort of turning the corner and making them really corporate and, in that kind of marketing sense. So, yeah, they get credit for all that. But since then, the average summer games go 200% over budget. So this is a study that just came out. It's called the Oxford Olympic Study. And it's a refreshing of something that these same researchers did in 2016. So these guys have looked at the numbers deeply, and their conclusion is 200% over budget is conservative for the Olympics, and the Rio Games cost $23.6 billion. So those are the games that we did not host. So I and my colleagues at No Games Chicago can say we save you and everyone else in the city of Chicago $24 billion. You're welcome.
Well, if we'd had the games, it would have meant, clearing some space and compromising the lives and activities of thousands to millions of people. It's probably a good thing that we didn't spend that money because we definitely needed other places. In your introduction or your lead up to the book that you sent to me, you talk about international intrigue and daring tactics, civic thuggery, bribes, real life spy story. That's a long list. Why don't you start going down it and tell us a little bit to activate our excitement some more?
Yeah, well, so this group of people, we, try to be smart about, organizing, and, Chicago is the birthplace of community organizing. So we take lessons from our elders and, our practice, and says basically the target, the question is, who can give you what you want? And in this case, it would be Mayor Daley, but he's not going to listen to us, clearly. So don't waste your time with the city council because they're all puppies in his lap. They won't do anything to make the mayor angry. So don't bother trying to, organize around the city council. No, we targeted the IOC themselves. And we took it, we looked at this as an election that we had to lose. So when you frame it in that way, it becomes a little clearer what your path is. We have to convince the members of the IOC to vote no. And we have to which means we have to understand them. What motivates the member of the IOC? What is precious to them? And that is this whole patina of the games that are sacred and loved. And it's almost like a religion with these people. So you can't diss it. You can't diss the games, though some people in No Games thought they were fascist and should be abolished 100%, right? And some people in No Games thought maybe under a different mayor, maybe Chicago could host the games. But we came out with a position that said Chicago is not the right place. This is not the right time for this project. And so take your project somewhere else. And that was our stance to the IOC, because we wanted to get in their heads and say, look, we get you. You want to have a good time. But if you come to Chicago, I'm not going to say we're going to slash your tires, but we are a feisty city. And we have big problems here that the people want money focused on things that are of concern to them, not a party 7 years from now. So that was our guiding principle. And it led us to meet with them, led us to go to Switzerland. We actually went to the headquarters of the IOC. They'd never been done before. And it was a giant surprise when we showed up at the President Rogi's press conference in June of 2009 with these books of evidence. So we had a 150-page book of reprints from the local papers, basically saying, this is a huge problem. Don't bring the games here. And it caused a huge stir. So that was daring, I'd say. One of Mayor Daley's insiders approached me and offered me 3 different kinds of jobs if I were to back the bid. And the last thing about the SPY is we had someone on the inside who was a member of the United States Olympic Committee, and for whatever reason, they decided that they didn't want the games here, and they fed us all kinds of information, including the directory that we were able to email all the members of the IOC personally, which we did. And finally, just before they voted on October 2nd, 2009 in Copenhagen, we were there in Copenhagen with more materials saying, this is a terrible thing. It's going south. The first federal lawsuit was just filed yesterday. So we're saying, as you're sitting down to vote, just keep in mind all these things we've told you. Your troubles are only just beginning with our first federal lawsuit. Please vote wisely this morning. And they did. On the first vote, Chicago was ejected.
Aha. So they were ejected. How did Daley take it?
I think he was pretty glum. He decided not to run for office, remember? So I'm not going to say that No Game Chicago chased Mayor Daley from office. His wife had contracted cancer, and, he'd been in office for 22 years, whatever. I mean, that's a pretty long track record. But honestly, he had placed everything in his power to get the games. And I think that was going to be his crowning moment. He would maybe run for office one more time in 11 and retire, and then become the titular head of the games and lord it over the opening ceremony with President Obama. I mean, the idea was that President Obama and Mayor Daley would then walk from President Obama's home in Kenwood and light the torch, in Washington Park. I mean, that was actually an articulated vision from both men. And so the games didn't happen, and everyone was shocked. If you see the pictures from Daley Plaza, it's like people lost their loved ones. And of course, the press got everything wrong. Their analysis was terrible. They were mourning something. No, it's not time for mourning. It's time for celebration. We dodged a cannonball, people. But from the reporting, it seemed as if, Chicago had the bubonic plague or something.
Tom, let me ask you. You said you weren't necessarily opposed to the Olympics coming to Chicago, or your group wasn't. Maybe under a different mayor, and I'm wondering.
No. Some people. I was I'm in the camp that they should be abolished 100%. But our official stance was this was the wrong place, the wrong time for the wrong project. So that was our official stance.
Would you be opposed to it if it was more corporate, paid for by corporations, and it didn't displace 1 million people, or you think it's not a good idea to have them anytime?
That's not possible, man. That's not possible. look, you might say I'm a libertarian capitalist or something. I look, if you want to do something and you have the money, go buy land, build a stadium. I don't care. Knock yourself out. Charge $100,000 a ticket. I don't care. Just don't use my money and don't use my land. So, but under that prescription, there would be no Olympics anywhere ever.
Yeah, I love the Olympics, and I understand the contradictions here. What it relates to me right now, and you brought it up in your email to me, was Chicago has billionaire sports owners for the Cubs, the White Sox, the Bears, and the Red Stars are owned by the Cubs people, the Ricketts family. They all want new stadiums. They want a soccer stadium for the Red Stars. They want a new Sox stadium, Sox field, whatever you want to call it. I loved Comiskey Park. I was sorry when they tore that down. And the Bears have a new stadium, and it looks like a spaceship. I don't mind it. I think it's kind of cool. Other people don't, and they want to build a new stadium. What's your take on all these attempts to do that? And I'm going to throw in the name Sean Densis. I don't know if you remember him, but he did a book about Sox and United Center using public money, the Sox and the Bulls using public money to build the White Sox Park and United Center.
Right. Well, it's the same thing, man. These are three billionaire families. Each, the McCaskies, the Ricketts, and the Reinsdorfs are each worth at least $2 billion each conservatively. And that doesn't include the annual revenues in the billions that they get from the major league sports franchises. So the White Sox has the worst record in baseball, like in recent memory.
I know.
So sorry. And the Bears aren't much better. It's like, so, dude, you want to build something? You're a billionaire. Just go build it. Just get off my back with this corporate welfare. And stop saying that this is going to make Chicago a world-class city. We are a world-class city.
Yes.
And if you want to make us a classier city, let's make sure every child in Chicago's public schools could read at or above grade level. So if they can't read at a grade level, then I'm sorry, we're really not that world-class. If the chance for a black kid to get shot is greater than the chance for me to stub my toe, walking down Lincoln Park Lane, we're not a world-class city. So we got some things to attend to right here at home before we can start bragging on, the way to make Chicago a world-class city is to give McCaskey $2 billion. Now, their team can lose in an even better stadium. No, that's not the way to make it. So I hate all that rhetoric when they say, this is what we need to make Chicago prosper.
Well, they've got a full court press going on about building some new facilities here. And what would be, if you were a magician, what would be your prediction? Will they get those things built after struggles and resistance? Or will they move out of town? Or will they build a stadium somewhere else?
Well, I wish I could tell you. I mean, thank God Governor Pritzker has put the red light on this. But Mayor Johnson is amenable to it. So come on, people, call the mayor's office, call your alderman and tell them no friggin' way. Make his phone jump off the hook. He's forgot that he's a school teacher. He was a union organizer. I don't understand it at all. So, and I don't see a lot of grassroots anger, frankly. And meanwhile, the civic groups that are supposed to watch our back, like the Chicago Metropolitan Planning Council, the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs, and the Civic Federation all seem to be asleep at the switch. Again, when we're talking about, up to $6 billion in public money, if you're talking about three stadiums, where is the anger? Where's the outrage? I don't get it. So, and oh, by the way, Chicago Sun-Times, you're supposed to be a working class paper, the hardest working paper in America. You should be covering this every day with screaming headlines. Stop the steal, stop the steal. Stop the steal. Billionaires stealing our stuff. That's my new T-shirts. Stop billionaires stealing our stuff.
Once they watch this show or listen to it, they'll jump on board, I'm sure.
You bet.
Let's switch gears a little bit, and let me ask you, and we have a few minutes remaining. You came to my mind a lot around the question of TIFs. And so I'd like you to tell our listeners and our viewers what a TIF is and what impact it's had on the city and how they have changed. And you might want to introduce it all by saying how you moved from being involved with Pegasus players to becoming an activist around stadiums and TIFs and the like?
Well, that's a whole long story, Michael. I mean, I was one of Chicago's most successful nonprofit theater producers in the 80s and up to 1990, but I left the lucrative world of arts administration to become an arts activist because the right wing was coming for the National Endowment for the Arts. Those of us who have a little gray in our hair remember something called culture wars. Yeah, remember culture wars when Jesse Helms and Pat Robertson and other right wing nuts tried to destroy the National Endowment for the Arts. And they failed, but they actually won the war. So Chicago, we lost the culture wars. And I will just say, what happened in those days is the prelude to where we have Trump and all the right-wing nuts that are dominating America's politics is a straight line from that day to this. And sadly, America's arts scene and America's nonprofits largely failed miserably to respond to the right-wing threat to this day. We've sort of been on the sidelines. That's what got me involved in civics and politics. But short answer on TIFs, tax increment financing, these are special districts created by the city that suck property taxes away into secret slush funds. And there's 123 of these bad boys right now. And in 2023, they sucked over $1 billion. That's property taxes that are not going to fund schools, fund the policemen, fund the parks, libraries. And the mayor has that money at his disposal to do as he sees fit. And at the end of 2023, there was $3 billion sitting in those TIF accounts. So that's money that should be immediately released to serve the people, in my opinion, not developers.
There was a lot of people were opposed to TIFs, and I'm wondering what the status of TIFs is today. Are there more TIFs being enacted?
No.
What's the rebound? What are we going to be
at the height? When I first got into this fight, there was 164 TIFs. So we've lost 40 TIFs, but they're taking more. The TIF program is sucking more money than ever out of the city into these secret funds, and I think that it's like crack. Reformers like Johnson and other socialists in city council cannot rid themselves of TIFs, regardless of their political orientation. It's too sexy. It's too much money for them to let go of. But I call TIFs racist and corrupting, and they should be abolished. And if you go to endtifsnow.org, you'll get our arguments. Oh, and by the way, people can find out about the No Games book at nogameschicagobook.com. And the book will be available on August 20th. And I hope people will read it and pass it around and maybe bring it to their classes and their other civic organizations.
What's the latest on the TIF that was Mayor Lightfoot was working on they were going to take the hideout out and all that, build a whole new gambling center over there. What's the status of that TIF?
Well, that was passed in the last days of Rahm Emanuel's administration over strenuous objection. That's the Lincoln Yards TIF, which is being built by Sterling Bay, which is a billionaire guy. That's Keating Crown, the grandson of Henry Crown. So he's a guy's a billionaire, and we're going to give his company over $1 billion in subsidy for Lincoln Yards. Only it's a crazy fantasy that's gone belly up. It never made any sense. But after COVID, the city within a city that they're proposing to build up there on the river and Armitage makes no sense. So there's only one building left that's building there, and it's just sitting there. They try to refinance it. They probably will end up selling it for a song. But the TIF is in place, and it should be repealed. It's a racist TIF. Lightfoot loved TIFs. She had her own use for them. Now Johnson is using them for his budget to fill up potholes. And his best idea, though, is to let many TIFs expire and then to use that revenue to finance low-income housing. That's the best idea I heard yet. But I just say, keep going, Mayor. Don't cancel a third of them, cancel them all, and let's just be done with this racist program.
Tom Tresser, it's always good to talk to you. You enlighten me and helped me rethink some of my thinking. And we got about a minute left. So how about you come forth with some words of inspiration to other community organizers, would-be community organizers, and all of us who are concerned about the direction of American politics and who will be our next president?
Well, my good friends out there, we got to get off our hands. We got to get out in the streets. We got to help each other and do it with joy and love and civic Ubuntu. I am because you are. I am because we are. We can't forget that we're all connected. And I think we're going to win big this November. But everyone has to jump in, throw some money to these campaigns, help people, go door to door, do what you can when you can. Otherwise we'll get the government we deserve. But I think there's a new day coming.
Thanks a lot, brother. It's always good to talk to you, and I want to thank